what I find really fascinating? When someone tells you about the game, the way that they craft the story behind the world, the theme, and what you actually do in the game is far more enticing than when someone just simply says, it's a worker placement game. Well, actually, you know, that one probably does work on me, but generally speaking, people are drawn in by narratives, stories, and characters, and being able to walk through a character's shoes in a world and envision the choices that they will make and the consequences that come with it just makes for an exciting board gaming experience. And in this video, I just want to talk all about story-based board games and how to get into them. G'day, my name's Danny. I'm an avid modern Australian board gamer from Australia who loves sharing my passion for board gaming with you, my friends, and my family. Let's get this video started.
Light flickers through the dungeon like serpents as the hero searches for a way out. A scuttling sound scatters across the stone, laying siege to his senses. Before he can arm himself, a creature seizes his gaze. Oh wait, it doesn't really say how this encounter is going to be resolved. Hang on a sec.
Shall I use these dice?
Wait, let me check.
What about the fate cards?
No, I don't think it seems to be that either.
Or maybe using this Tasmanian Heritage Triple Cream Brie cheese?
Let me look it up in this convolutedly written rulebook. Oh, here it is. It says, to resolve this encounter, you must roll for initiative based on the number of co-op games you have in your entire board game collection that are rated at least with a BGG rating of 7.5 and above.
That's impossible.
Well, what are you waiting for? Start rolling, hero.
Now, when it comes to exploring story-based games, there's a few points I think you might need to know. First of all, the theme is at the forefront of the game. So the idea of telling a rich story, maybe a cool character back history, or even building your character as part of the game itself is a big aspect of the game. The mechanics of the game kind of help to support the telling of the story and the narrative that unfolds and maybe gives players a way to make important choices throughout the game, but it's not actually the most important part of the game's design. The narrative, the world building, the story arc, as well as the character's journey is something that is really well infused into the game itself. And so when heading into a story-rich game, if you're not someone who loves reading flavor text or someone who wants to explore what a character thinks or maybe challenges your beliefs about what you thought of a particular world, then maybe you might find story-driven games ones that you might want to try before you actually buy them for your game collection. And one needs to be invested in the world. If you see a world and you're like, yes, this is a world I can totally see myself traveling through. If that's something that sounds enticing to you, then story-driven games might definitely be up your alley. I've always been really impressed with how board games have been able to push the envelope, especially in a day and age where modern technology is simply everywhere and we can't escape from it. Board games are a great way of just really bringing it back and telling something classical. Now, I always really used to love playing those games where you could just imagine yourself exploring a world, picking whichever path or avenue or quest you want to go on, and just pursuing that path and seeing where it leads. This is a really great gateway game that I want to introduce to you that allows you to do that freedom to explore an open world, pursue whatever quest you want, and just uncover the world's mysteries. And this is a beautiful game of world building called The Lands of Galzyr. Lands of Galzyr is actually a very simple open world board game to play. Not only that, it is dressed in this beautiful critter theme. What I really love about this game is its simplicity. The idea that you're going to be controlling one of 4 different characters, and each character has 4 attributes that correspond to different colored dice that players will use to resolve skill checks throughout the game. And a skill check is basically testing an attribute, so it might be your ability to investigate, and then using that attribute by rolling dice to try and see if you pass a particular problem or not that you're faced with. In this game, players are going to be exploring the map of Galzyr. They'll be moving their little wooden critter across the board, visiting different towns, cities, and places. And what is so immensely beautiful about this game is the fact that you can go wherever you want. If that pathway leads to a particular symbol, then that symbol has a story locked inside it. If you want to go to the city and visit the market, or even bathe in the hot springs, you can do so. You will rarely ever encounter 2 days where you experience the same story, and this is such a brilliantly designed game. It's a game where you can just literally step in, play, 8 to 10 rounds, and then see how many prestige you can earn, record it in your journal, and then pack it away and then get it out again the next week. And the stories in this game are so humorous. Now, there are a couple of features that I do want to highlight. This board actually has 2 sides to them. You've kind of got this summer and spring side, and you also have a winter and autumn side, which does change and influence the types of stories and quests that you go on. Each feature on this map has different symbols on them, and when you go to that particular symbol, if you want to trigger an event, there's a whole deck of cards that appears in this box that you can use that will trigger events for you. What you'll often see in a game like this is it usually comes with some scenes, and each of the scenes is numbered. As you can see, this is scene 130. You'll have some flavor text about what sort of event is happening in the game. And then there are some interactive key phrases that kind of adds a little bit more flavor and definition to the world, as you can see. You can see that there's 2 options to deal with that particular story moment. Hey Danny, I heard that this game has a really rich story where you get to walk in the shoes of the characters. Yeah, you get to feel what the characters feel and suffer the consequences of their poor decision making as well. So I roll for combat and looks like I beat you. I win the game. Sounds like the story of my life. I've recently discovered that nostalgia can be immensely powerful. I think pretty much all of my board game choices and my hobbies are purely based on nostalgia, actually. Well, there are games out there that are story-driven that have been adapted by some of those books that we used to love as kids. One of my favorite series of books to read when I was younger was Goosebumps, but also the Choose Your Own Adventure books. There's something beautiful about the idea of reading a book and having the power to choose where you go next lie right in your hands. The Choose Your Own Adventure series of board games, I think there's only 2 at the moment, is basically a deck of cards. And the deck of cards is divided into about 5 different chapters, especially for House of Danger. And what you're going to be doing is you're going to be trying to succeed and meet the goal that is outlined in that chapter. That might be getting inside the actual House of Danger. Not sure why you go into a house that's pretty dangerous, but yes, that seems to be the goal. And then as you read the text on the cards, the back of the cards give you choices and different skill checks that you make. And your skill check success comes down to the different items that you pick up along the way through the different chapters, as well as the danger level. And basically you've got to roll a number that is equal to or higher than the danger level to succeed. Otherwise you lose 2 psychic points, which determines kind of like your success and achievement level in that chapter. What I really like about the House of Danger is the sense of choice. And yes, whilst the choices in the Choose Your Own Adventure series are on these really funky and wonky guide rails where you can either go left or right, and then depending on which way you choose, it can feel a lot quite random. It's that sense of letting go of that, the sense of going on an adventure and just seeing what outrageous choice you might make. And sometimes in these games, I might just choose the most outrageous decision out of the 2 just to really see where you go. And one thing about these games that I used to remember was that there were about 20 different endings per story. And so when you came to an ending, that really ended your story arc for the game, and then you had to kind of revisit some of that. Or just really getting to that final boss and just trying to defeat the final boss using the items that you accrued so far. And also love how these games really blend seamlessly with the books on your bookshelf. So if you're struggling to find places to store some of your games, here's a great place to hide them so that the hubby doesn't notice. I vividly remember over 8 years ago really getting into thematic story-driven board games, and I'm a huge fan of horror movies and thriller movies. In fact, part of me wanted to be like a filmmaker, and so I think this channel is kind of a little bit of a compromise, I guess. So when I got Betrayal at House on the Hill, it was one of those games where I thought, yes, this is a game that is going to really play into all those horror tropes and just really evoke that feeling of taking on the role of a character and exploring where their character arc might go. And what I really liked about Betrayal at House on the Hill was the fact that there are 50 different scenarios contained in the one box. Not only that, it had you creating the floor plan to the house at the beginning of the game, which essentially is going to look really different each time. And that's such a really cool thing because it means that the geography of the map is going to be different every scenario. The other thing that is really cool is the fact that one person is going to trigger a haunt and one person at the table is going to be the traitor. They're going to take their secret traitor's tome, go to another room on the other side of the suburb, read their rules and their objectives and win condition, and they're going to come back and try and fulfill that without the rest of the players knowing what that is. Similarly, the survivors are also going to be reading from their particular book and working out what their win condition is. And so all of a sudden, this game moves from a cooperative game where you're just exploring a house and you're just kind of discovering what creepy crawlies might be hidden within, to pitting yourselves against one another. And that was such a beautiful twist in the game. And I remember playing this game with like some spooky music, lighting candles to create some atmosphere, and even chuckling at some of the really funny writings that would appear on the event and item cards in the game. And I think what really made this game so much fun was a mixture of campiness, but also the flavor of some of the stories and the cool situations that you are put in. I mean, there was one situation where I think we had to build a toy plane because we had been shrunken down and we had to try and get in the plane and navigate that plane through the mansion and fly it out a window. It was such a challenging scenario, but yet it was made for such a memorable experience. And I think a lot of these story-driven games gives you the platform for creating some of those cool memories. Dungeons & Dragons has been one of the biggest sources of inspiration for a lot of these story-driven board games. The idea of going through a dungeon, exploring a map, and defeating minions, all with the ultimate goal of improving and leveling up your character, as well as fulfilling that important story arc, is something that everyone wishes to achieve when they dive into a game. One of the very first dungeon crawling board games that I ever bought for my collection was a game called Mice and Mystics. Now, when I was a teenager, I was a huge fan of Red Wall and the Rats of Nim, and this was a game that literally popped off the screen when I saw it on Will Wheaton's tabletop. And it was a game where I thought, oh my goodness, this is all my mouse dreams come true. I'm also born in the year of the rat, by the way, and I just really was enamored and fell in love with the theme of this game immediately. Story games can also be campaign driven. The idea that you follow the journey of a band of characters as you progress through 10 to 12 different scenarios, with each scenario feeling a little bit different. Now in this game, the rooms that are set up are determined at the beginning of each chapter, and as you progress your way through each room, you reveal story moments from this book called The Sorrow and Remembrance, and then you also reveal encounters using the encounter deck. Throughout the game, you're going to be battling different creatures, which is based on this initiative track, which kind of is basically the order in which different characters are going to fight and perform their moves. And then you've got different characters with different abilities, different items and weapons that you can search for and then equip them onto your actual mouse. You're taking this journey in real time with them, really just kind of exploring the highs and lows of their successes, and not to mention the cheese wheel of doom, which causes more encounters to kind of occur. The rules in Mice and Mystics are quite large and voluminous. Once you've played it a couple of times, some of the rules you can kind of just house rule because it actually makes the game a whole lot more approachable and fun when you do it that way. And that's what I ended up doing with the game. I just really dived straight into the story. When it comes to immersing yourself in a rich thematic story, I cannot ignore the world-building creative talents of Ryan Lockett. Ryan Lockett is a board game designer that designs games that are set in the world of Arzium. Not only does he design the game's mechanics, but also writes the story, as well as does all of the vivid fantasy art that you see right here on this table. One of my favorite games of his is Sleeping Gods. I liken Sleeping Gods to a game like The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, where you get to travel by boat, you get to travel across an atlas of different islands, and then stopping at cool, interesting points along the way and discovering what quests befell you. And I think what's really cool about Ryan Lockett's game Sleeping Gods is the fact that there's the freedom to move wherever you like. You've got this global map where you track all of your adventures and your quests, and then each and every island has an interesting feature for you to be able to read from when you look at the storybook. And then there are quests that kind of head your way, or there's combat or some really cool monsters that you have to fight. So the big thing about this is the sense of freedom. The idea that I could choose to go north, south, east, west, and maybe explore the western seas for a while. Maybe I want to go to the city and explore what sort of markets they might have at that particular place and buy items that I can use to load in my ship. And the fact that you actually manage your ship and your ship can take damage in this game is such a cool little touch to that sense of, yes, we're going on an expedition. Yes, we're exploring uncharted territory. And yes, we've got all these crew members with all these cool abilities that use these command tokens to spend them on. I think this game has the right touches of everything that you need in a really cool self-contained RPG-like adventure. I really love the creature combat mechanic though, because when you're facing different creatures in this game, they actually have these little grids that are featured below them, and you connect the grids together. So if you've got two creatures, you actually place them side by side, and those grids can kind of be attacked in several moves. And the idea of the combat in this game is that you're using your character's abilities, you're drawing a card from the fate deck and using that value to create damage that covers up those grids. And some of the grid squares has health for the character, some of the grid squares have damage that's inflicted back to you, some of them have also special powers that makes it harder for you to defeat them. And by covering that grid and then splashing that damage over to several creatures kind of emulates that effect that you're, battling a couple of minions at the same time and you're slashing them with your swords and weapons. This game has a true sense of adventure, all the way down from exploring this book, which has multiple pages and multiple locations for you to actually visit throughout your games. You're gonna meet people along the way. You might acquire certain quests that you didn't really expect. Maybe there are people that will ask for your help. And the fact that when you read the story from the book, that's contained in this game, you're given with a choice. You're given with several tests that you're trying to overcome and fulfill using your character stats. And now if you really love what you see here with Sleeping Gods, you might want to check out some of Ryan Lockett's other smaller games, which kind of have elements that are featured right here. One of his early games, Above and Below, is all about exploring the caverns below and building a village underneath the ground. Then you've got a game called Near and Far, which introduced this idea of an atlas book that you could kind of progress and move across throughout an entire game. I can see this wall of games is going to be quite large. And then you've got Now or Never, the game that completes the Above and Below, Near and Far trilogy, where this game also comes with several chapter books where you can play as one of 4 characters and explore their story arc as you explore this world of Arzium. And then you've got other peripheral games like The Ancient World. And soon enough, you probably won't see me anymore because these games are going to literally block your vision. The game that inspired Sleeping Gods, Islebound. And all of these games are set in Arzium, and the fact that you can kind of play these games and see a slice of the world of Arzium is just a really fantastic way to see world building. So what did you think of all those different approaches to telling a good story through board gaming? Are there some games on this list that have piqued your interest, or do you know some other similar games out there? There are so many story-based driven games in the board gaming world that I can't possibly cover them all. So maybe this might be chapter 1 in a series of other story-based board game videos. Who knows? Thank you once again for joining me for another Board Game Sanctuary video. If you really found this video super helpful, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button and tell all your friends about this amazing hobby. Otherwise, this is Danny Sonia. I'll see you again in the near future. If you're on my Patreon page, thank you for supporting me once again, and watch your name come up in the credit rolls. See you soon. Bye.